My name is Tenzin Dorje. I am was a Buddhist monk, devoted to a life of silence, detachment, and inner peace. For 34 years, I lived in a remote monastery nestled in the Himalayas, waking before the sun to chant, meditate, and strip away desire. We believed in karma, rebirth, the wheel of suffering, and the pursuit of nirvana release from the self. I had trained my mind to be still. I had quieted the ego, as we were taught. I believed that if I let go of all things, I would be free. But on the morning of March 18, 2025, something happened that shattered everything I thought I understood. It was a simple session. I was seated cross-legged beneath the Bodhi tree, behind our temple spot I had meditated beneath 1,000 times. The air was thin and cool. I slipped easily into breath, awareness, stillness, and then nothing. No body, no breath, no thoughts, no sound. I had died, not with violence, not with fear, with stillness so complete, I didn't even realize I was gone until I opened my eyes and realized they were no longer mine. I was standing in a realm I had never imagined. Not another life, not the next cycle, not a void, not rebirth. A place, a presence, a storm. The sky burned with gold and crimson. A wind howled, though there were no trees. And in the distance raised high, on a hill, I saw a man, crucified, bleeding, glowing, weeping, and somehow, I knew this was Christ, and I had come face to face with the truth I never sought. I didn't move. I couldn't. The sight of him, Jesus, suspended between heaven and earth, held me in place like gravity, but it wasn't the nails or the wounds that paralyzed me. It was his eyes. Even as he hung in agony, his eyes searched for mine, and when they found me, I felt like I had been struck by a truth so deep, so ancient, it shook the foundation of everything I had ever believed. He saw me, not the robes, not the title of monk, not the years of meditation or vows. He saw me, Tenzin, the boy who had lost his parents young, the teenager who turned to philosophy to survive grief, the man who had silenced every question by saying, "Desire is the cause of suffering." But this gaze didn't ask me to detach. It invited me to feel, and in that moment, I felt everything. I dropped to my knees, not out of reverence, out of need, because I couldn't stand under the weight of that love. It wasn't like anything I had ever known, not compassion, not kindness. It was like being pierced with mercy. Jesus said nothing, but his silence was louder than all the sutras I'd memorized. I looked at his wounds, at the crown, at the blood, and deep inside, something cracked open. I had spent decades trying to erase self, to escape ego, to extinguish attachment. But this man on the cross? He didn't escape suffering, he embraced it. He didn't detach from the world. He died for it. And suddenly, I couldn't breathe. I whispered, "Who are you?" And in the spirit, I heard, "The one you never searched for, but who never stopped searching for you." And then he said, "Come, Tenzin, you've emptied yourself for enlightenment. Now let me show you what it means to be filled with truth." And what he revealed next would tear the veil from everything I believed about karma, rebirth, and salvation. Jesus stepped down from the cross not as a ghost, not as an illusion, but in radiance, with scars still shining, not hidden. He didn't float. He walked toward me. And as he came, the sky around us changed. The crimson hue shifted to gold, then to deep silence. He looked at me with sadness, not pity, not shame, but grief, as though he'd watched me wander through lifetimes of answers that led nowhere. Then he spoke not with lips, but from within me. You have spent your life trying to be free from self, but I created you not to vanish, but to be known. I stood stunned. In my tradition, we taught that the self was an illusion, that the goal of life was to dissolve it, escape the wheel, reach nirvana, extinction of identity. But now, this man, who bore the marks of purposeful suffering, looked at me and said, "You were not meant to be erased. You were meant to be loved." And suddenly, I saw a vision of the wheel we'd always spoken of. But it wasn't peaceful. It spun violently, filled with souls running, climbing, falling, trying to earn their way into peace through rituals, silence, denial. I saw my own life repetition, striving, meditation, fasting, but never rest. And then he said, "That is not salvation. That is slavery." I broke because I saw the truth. I had lived in fear of rebirth, not joy in it. I didn't want another life. I wanted peace. But I had believed the lie that I could achieve it on my own by letting go of everything. Jesus stepped forward, and with one word, the wheel shattered. He said, "Finished." And I suddenly understood. He wasn't another teacher. He wasn't one more step in a cycle. He was the end of the cycle. He was the door. And then he reached out his hand and said, "You do not need to ascend." I descended. "You do not need to awaken. You need to be reborn." And when I took his hand, I felt the weight of every lifetime fall from me like ash. But he wasn't done. He said, "Let me show you what karma could never do, and why grace was always the only way." What he showed me next made me weep for the billions still trying to earn what he already paid for. Jesus held my hand, and suddenly, I saw my life again, but not like before. Not as a stream of events. I saw it like a ledger, as if every action I had ever done, every word spoken, every thought held, was being weighed on an invisible scale. And then he whispered, "This is karma, an endless balancing, never settled, never sure." I saw moments of kindness, feeding the poor, guiding younger monks, long hours of silent prayer. I also saw moments I had buried, silent arrogance, pride in my discipline, looking down on those who weren't as awakened. And I realized I was never going to be enough. Not in this life, not in 1,000 more. The scale never stopped tipping. Karma, as I understood it, was a weight. Even when I did good, it wasn't peace. I felt it was pressure. The constant need to keep trying, keep correcting, keep cycling through existence until the scales were even, if that was even possible. Then Jesus showed me something else. He showed me the cross again, but this time, not from a distance. I saw his blood fall to the earth. I saw his body broken, and I saw a different scale mine. But this time, Jesus stepped onto it. And in that moment, everything tipped. "This is grace," he said. "Not earned, not balanced, given." Tears poured from my eyes, not because I felt guilty, but because I felt free. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to save myself. I was letting him do it. He said, "Karma demands payment. Grace gives pardon. You were told to release desire, but I came to fulfill your deepest one, to be known, to be forgiven, to be loved without condition." I fell to my knees, a Buddhist monk undone by mercy, and in that silence, he said, "Now I will show you the longing of your people, and why I have not forgotten them." What I saw next was the beginning of a revival I never imagined. When Jesus said, "Let me show you the longing of your people," I was overwhelmed by a flood of light, and then I was standing in the spirit, hovering above temples, mountain paths, crowded cities, and remote villages across Asia. I saw monks in orange robes, chanting beneath banyan trees. I saw pilgrims crawling up temple steps on their knees. I saw children lighting incense with trembling hands, not out of joy, but out of fear. Fear of punishment, fear of repeating pain, fear of never escaping the wheel. Jesus said, they were taught to silence their longing, but I hear it, even when it is hidden behind ritual. Then, he showed me something I had never seen before. The souls of these people, not their beliefs, not their rituals, their souls. And their souls were crying out not for enlightenment, but for a father. Some didn't know who they were crying to. Others whispered prayers into the wind, hoping someone might hear. And Jesus said, they were made to walk with me in the garden, not to wander in circles without end. I saw my own monastery, the one where I had lived, and I felt the presence of my brother's good men, honest seekers, but seekers trapped in silence. I saw one young monk meditating with tears in his eyes. His lips didn't move, but his soul cried, is there more? And Jesus answered, yes, there is more. There is me. Then he turned to me and said, you must speak, Tenzin, because they will not hear from the West, but they will hear from one who once walked their path and found me at the end of it. I broke, because I realized my story wasn't just about me. It was about them, the forgotten, the silent, the devoted, who had never been told the full truth. Then Jesus said, but you must also see what happens when they reject me, not out of rebellion, but because no one ever told them who I truly am. And what he showed me next tore my heart in half. Jesus stood beside me as I was lifted into a realm unlike anything I had ever known. There was no temple, no altar, no chanting, just souls, millions of them. I saw them walking, wandering, searching, not in flames, not in terror, but in a silence so deep it ached. They weren't evil. They weren't violent. They were unreached. And Jesus said, his voice trembling with sorrow, these are the ones who died never hearing my name, not because they rejected me, but because no one ever told them who I was. I watched as they reached for light that flickered just beyond their grasp. I saw their memories, altars, incense, sacred texts, mantras, discipline. I saw the lives they lived filled with hunger for the divine, and yet missing the one they were made for. They tried to earn salvation, tried to purify themselves, tried to silence desire, hoping it would bring them peace. But the silence never became presence, and I heard them crying out aloud. But from deep within, why did no one tell us? Why did no one come? I dropped to my knees, because I realized I could have been one of them. And then Jesus knelt beside me, not as a king towering above, but as a man so broken with love that it broke me. He whispered, this is why I weep, because I died for them. And still, they never knew. I looked into his face and asked, what happens to them? And with tears running down his cheeks, he said, I am mercy. I know every heart, but now you know. And now, you must speak. He stood and lifted me up. You have been shown this not to feel guilt, but to carry glory, the glory of the gospel, the only truth that saves. And now, there is one final thing I must show you. What happens when a soul says, yes? And what he showed me next was the joy I never found in silence, surrender, or self-denial. It was home. Jesus reached out his hand, and in an instant, everything changed. The silence of wandering souls faded, and I was suddenly standing in a place so bright, so alive, that I forgot the sorrow of a moment ago. He said, now see what happens when even one heart says yes. And then I saw her, a young woman. She had once been a Buddhist nun, cloistered in a temple far from any church. I recognized her face not from this life, but from my monastery. She used to pray quietly under her breath, asking questions no one dared answer. I remembered her eyes, always searching. And now, She was home. I saw her run out float, not bow run into Jesus' arms. He embraced her like a father, welcoming his long-lost daughter. She wept, not from shame but from joy, radiant joy. And in that moment, I felt it too. I saw angels rejoicing. I saw light swirl around her like music, and I heard a voice declare, "She is mine." She heard me, and she came. Jesus turned to me and said, "This is the celebration heaven holds for even one who believes. No incense, no ritual, just me and a soul that finally rests." Then he showed me many others, more monks, more seekers, even former skeptics. Men and women who had seen visions, who had met him in dreams, who had turned from lifetimes of striving to simple, humble surrender. And in every case it was the same. Not fear, not rules, relationship. He said, "I did not come to erase your culture. I came to fulfill your longing, not to destroy your questions, but to answer them with my presence." And then I saw something that made my heart burn. A great wave rising in the east. Not water, not war, worship. Young men and women across Asia, lifting their hands not to the void but to Jesus. And I heard a cry rise up from the earth. "We have found him. We were blind, but now we see." Tears streamed down my face. Jesus turned to me and said, "Your people are not forgotten. They were never too far. And now I ask you, Tenzin, will you go back and tell them?" And I knew what he meant. It was time to return, to wake up, to speak. But before I left, he had one last thing to say. The light began to dim, not in sadness, but like the curtain was closing on eternity so I could step back into time. Jesus stood before me, not with thunder, but with tenderness. He placed his scarred hand on my shoulder and said, "You emptied yourself for peace, but now I fill you with truth. You sought silence. Now carry my voice." I wept, not because I feared the world I was returning to, but because I had found something so beautiful, so final, so true. I didn't want to leave it behind. But he reminded me, they are waiting. The monks, the seekers, the silent ones who feel forgotten. Tell them, I am not the Western God. Tell them I am the Eternal One. Tell them I am love made flesh. And then he said the words I will carry to my grave. Tell them they don't need to strive. They only need to say yes. With that, I fell faster than light until I awoke in my own body. A breath, a jolt, screams of startled monks around me. They thought I had died in meditation, but I had not died. I had seen the crucified Christ, and now I could never be silent again. I stood up slowly, and before anyone could ask, I whispered, "His name is Jesus." They stared in confusion. Some wept, some turned away, some listened. And now, I travel, quietly, boldly, from monastery to village to soul, sharing not religion, but the one who ended my search. I was a Buddhist monk. Now, I am a disciple of the one I never knew I needed. He is not an idea. He is not a metaphor. He is not a step in a cycle. He is the way, the truth, the life, and he is waiting for you too.